Welcome to another edition of Impact TV. I'm Kevin Hilton, the CEO of Impact, and today our guest is the new General Treasurer of the Ironworkers, Bernie Evers. Welcome, Bernie.
Pleasure to be here, Kevin. Thank you very much for the offer.
So Bernie's new in the job as General Treasurer, and as has been our tradition, we give the Ironworker world and everybody else out there an opportunity to meet you live and in color. And so let me throw this one at you. How long have you been an Ironworker, Bernie?
I got initiated October 1st, 1981, so 34 years now.
Wow. It's been good to you.
It has.
When you started out as an iron worker that first day back in October, did you think that one day you'd be at the highest levels of the ironworkers?
No, my biggest goal was just to become a journeyman. And when I did become a journeyman, that was probably one of the proudest days of my life. Running, and I became a foreman and had an opportunity to work on a lot of high-profile jobs, and it was really rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. And so how did you become an iron worker?
Right after high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to college, and after my first year of college, I wanted to get on with my life and started to look at different occupations I could get involved in. And I grew up in a blue-collar area, and there's a lot of Teamsters, teachers, police officers, firemen, and construction workers. And I started putting feelers out there to see what my options were. And I had a relative that was in the ironworkers, and he told me that they were getting ready to put an apprentice program together, and it was going to be a big class because there's a lot of work coming up in the Boston area. It was something that I was interested in, and the more I looked into it, I thought this was the place for me.
Did you know what an ironworker was?
Well, because I had family in it, I did.
Yeah, that's interesting. So where'd you grow up exactly?
I grew up in Charlestown in Boston,
Yeah.
and like I said, it's a blue-collar area that a lot of construction workers come from. And when I became an ironworker, there's quite a few ironworkers from that area.
Oh, fabulous. So you served an apprenticeship, became a journeyman. What was your favorite aspect of being an ironworker, working at the trade?
I think the camaraderie amongst the members, that you could get on a job and just knowing that there are people that are taking on the same tasks as you, that everybody's working together to get a project done, meant a lot. And to see the brotherhood, no matter where you went, whether it's East Coast, West Coast, if you ran into another ironworker, there was a common bond between you and that other ironworker. And I think that's a part of the trade, the difficulty part of the trade, how heavy the trade is, and everybody working together, it seems to bring a big bond together. So the bond and the camaraderie amongst the members really meant a lot.
Was when you're sitting in those apprenticeship classes and learning out on the job, was it pretty much what you anticipated, or was it radically different than what you thought?
I liked the apprenticeship classes because now I could relate it to a career. And when I was in college, I was taking classes, but I didn't know really the direction I wanted to go. So once I got accepted into the apprenticeship classes, the classes were tuned to the job specific. And that's what really made me like the class and learn more. And then again, your classmates, there's a bond between classmates and you, because now you're going through this together.
Do you still stay in touch with some of the guys?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So when you're out there as a new ironworker, apprentice ironworker, first year, second year, third year, did you start kind of setting your sights on different jobs, or was it, I just need to grind through and make sure I become a JIW?
Yeah, that was the biggest goal, was to get through the schooling, go to work, learn the trade, and learn off your peers.
Was there, looking back, I presume you worked mostly in Boston.
Yeah.
Was there a particular project or employer that you looked at and said, man, I really loved working on that job?
Well, each project has its own story behind the project. And there's a different phase of a project that you can always lean towards. As for a contractor that I worked for, when I first started, I got into the rods, and I did that for about 6 months of my first year. Then I went to a siding company. My second year, I got on with a structural company, and I stayed with that company for about 12 years before I became a full-time officer in the local.
You enjoyed that? Were they good to you?
It was quite an experience. I got to work on a lot of high-profile jobs in and around the Boston area, and it was very rewarding. And I drive by the projects now with my kids, and I'll point to a project and say, well, I worked on that, and they can now tell the story that I'm going to tell them, because each project has a story.
Yeah. No particular project really jumps out in your mind.
Well, I had an opportunity to work on, like I said, several large projects, International Place in the downtown area.
Yeah.
That was quite a job. The new Boston Garden, that's my last job before going into the business agent's job.
Yeah.
So there were high-profile jobs, and there was a few of them that I really enjoyed.
Boston's changed a lot, hasn't it?
It has. And I came down in 2000 to head the organizing department, and just going back, driving around, it's changed dramatically.
What about your neighborhood in Charlestown?
Oh, that has changed too. It's now expanded where it's a lot of professionals have moved in into the Boston area.
So let's shift gears a little bit, Bernie. You started out low these many years ago. Safety was pretty different than it is today. How would you characterize safety back then compared to what it's like today?
Well, just on the tie-off issue, when I was working with the tools, there was an emphasis on tying off, but it wasn't really strict, where you would have a safety lanyard on your belt, but people would cut that off. And you were more getting the job done in your mind, that you couldn't be tied back. But now the changes that are made, safety is a key topic in the union halls, on union meetings. We want our members to be able to go home safe at night. And the changes that were made are really better for the industry.
Sure.
And back then we didn't know the dynamics that safety had on a project. We didn't know the results that it had on a contractor or the end user. So it's something that is really beneficial to the ironworker and the industry as a whole.
Sure, there's no question that safety is a competitive advantage or disadvantage, and as every day goes by, I think you see like you said, the emphasis allows us to distinguish ourselves from our competition. So you're working on the field, you're JIW, making some good money, enjoying your work. At some point you said, I'm interested in joining the leadership of the Boston Local Union. How did that come about?
Actually, I had a few members come up to me and thought I ought to seek office within the local. And I started to put feelers out there, but there was two individuals that kept prodding me and pushing me to really dig in with. And as I did some research on I ran for vice president, did some research on what that job would detail and the experience that is going to be needed, vice president of local, right? And what was needed to be vice president, I ended up going back to school to get education on those needs. And then I ended up running for office because I felt that the members who I talked to were very supportive, and ended up taking a shot at it and ended up winning the vice president spot.
Was it contested?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was rewarding at the end because I felt now accepted by my peers.
Yeah.
And that they voted for me to be in the leadership position of the local, and that was very rewarding also.
So you eventually got into a role as an organizer in Boston. How did that come about?
Well, when I was vice president, an opening came up, and the president took the business agent spot, and I became president. And there was another opening. The business agent organizer retired, and I, as president, filled that role. And that's how I became the organizer. When I became organizer, there wasn't really any schooling to go to, no formal training whatsoever. It was, here's the job, go do it. So it was learn by the ropes and go out and just start talking to workers.
Right. And how has that evolved?
Well,
Or how did you see it evolve, at least in Boston?
well, we had a great district council president and
Joe
Joe Quilty,
Yeah.
and a very supportive business manager who was Jay Hurley, and apprentice coordinator Bobby Banks, and we built an organizing team. And we were all working together, all the agents, the E-board, we were all working together towards organizing. And we seen a situation where at one time there's a lot of issues with the organizing efforts to today where there's never an issue when they're bringing people in.
What would you characterize as your biggest victory up there in the Local 7 Boston?
We had several victories, but the biggest victory is getting support of the members.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest.
Tell me about that.
I was against organizing when I became the organizer. I said, what I want to do is look at this position, and whereas president before, if I didn't think it was needed, I was ready to just walk away because it was a hot topic. And once I got in and the team was put together, we seen the advancements that we made, and they're great advancements. We increased the size of the local, we increased the work opportunities for our members, and then to build the support amongst our members was very gratifying.
But I think some of our viewers might be a little confused. A labor union organizes workers. Why would the membership be opposed to that?
A lot of the members believed, as I did, that if you organize a new worker, that's less work opportunities for me.
Gotcha.
And through the climate program, myself and Jay Hurley started to educate the members on the need of organizing and how organizing benefits the locals. Then the membership started to understand and started to support the organizing efforts.
Good. Giving opportunities for other people in the area to have a good life. Let me ask you this. So you're working there in Boston. At some point, someone recognized that talent that you have relative to organizing and brought you to Washington. How did that happen?
In 2000, I got a call from the General President, Jake West. He wanted me to come down for an interview. I came down with District Council President Joe Quilty and had an interview, and he offered me the job to head the organizing department for the International.
So you've been here for over 15 years, or about 15 years. What was the biggest shock to you when you came here to the International in Washington, D.C.?
I believed that a lot of the unions were on the same page as organizing as my home local, and there were some that were great for organizing and then some that were opposed to organizing, and I think that was the biggest surprise, that we weren't all on the same page.
Is that still true?
We have areas where we have a difficult time to organize.
Understood. So tell us about your time as the Director of Organizing. It's been a long time, a lot of water under the bridge. What would you point to as the biggest challenge there?
The labor laws don't work well for the unions, but then also the working conditions that workers now endure on a daily basis. And when I travel extensively, and I'll have the opportunity to sit next to a person who will ask, what do I do for a living? And when I tell them I'm an ironworker, they say, well, what are you working on? And I'll say, no, I'm an organizer for the ironworkers now. And I tell them about jobs I did work on and now my role as the organizer. And I talk about the working conditions that I see. And people are in disbelief that this could happen in the United States and Canada today. Right. We have instances where a woman up in New York was claiming that she worked for a non-union contractor and she didn't have any welding training whatsoever. And because of the no welding training, she was told to weld rebar. And she told her foreman, well, I don't know how to weld rebar. And the foreman said, I don't care, just start welding. Now she starts welding without a safety shield, without a welding shield. She gets flash burn. She had to go to the hospital. They had to drain her eyes. And she was left with the hospital bill. Not only that, how would you like to be an end user having people who aren't certified to weld welding on your project? And seeing stuff like that really lets the general public know when I'm talking to them what's going on in the industry, and they are really surprised to hear that that is going on today. And there's numerous stories like that throughout the United States and Canada.
And it's appalling. There's no doubt about that. But I think you're touching on one of the key distinguishing advantages we have is our training is so powerful and so involved, and we just can't seem to crack the code completely on getting it out, particularly to the end user, so that they understand our value proposition. And that's one of the things Impact works with the ironworkers and our contractors every day to do. So let's fast forward. It's this year. General President Dean walks into your office. You're on the same floor here in this building. And he says, Bernie, I want you to become our general treasurer. What's going through your mind?
Well, when I first got notification that President Wise was stepping down, we had a General Executive Council meeting, and there was a lot of shock. We voted at that time to have General President Dean assume that position, and he appointed General Treasurer Pixa as General Secretary. So there's an opening. One vice president came up to me right after the meeting and congratulated me on being the new General Treasurer. And I said, what are you talking about? It hasn't been picked. I don't know if I've been even considered. And he said, no, you're the person that's going to be picked. And then another vice president came to me and said shortly after that, if you are asked, you have to take that position. Mm-hmm. And it was a couple of weeks later where President Dean came to me and asked if I'd be interested in the position, and I said I would be. And he said, well, congratulations, you are now my General Treasurer. And I was kind of taken back. I was surprised, and I didn't really know if I heard what I actually heard. And then we got up and shook hands, but it was very humbling.
A long way from October 1980 back in Boston,
oh,
right?
That is, yep.
So it's a radical shift from the Director of Organizing for the Ironworkers to the General Treasurer. What's really been the biggest challenge in that new role?
For the most part, I've been here for 15 years, so I knew the role of the General Treasurer. With the financing of the International, what I didn't know about was the side work that has to be done with the General Treasurer. We are one of 3 owners that own the building where our office is in, and the General Treasurer is almost like the landlord. He oversees the grounds, the building, the upkeep, the maintenance crews. If there's a problem with the building, the General Treasurer gets that job. Or if a tenant is leaving, then you have to look at towards other tenants to bring them in, and you're negotiating contracts with other tenants. So I think that was the biggest surprise. But being here for 15 years, I had a grasp of the financial part of it.
So in your new position, you're now on the board of Impact. You're the money guy for the organization. Give me some impressions of that role. You've had a couple of board meetings under your belt.
To be a part of the meeting is fantastic. To have contractors and unions working together on a common goal, watching out for one another, and looking out for the industry. It's really impressive.
Good. You've raised a family on an ironworker's salary, and you've lived here. I know your family still lives remotely. How does that affect the work that you have to do in your personal life? Because we always say family first.
In 2000, when I first came down, my wife and kids moved down here with me. As the kids got older, they went back to school up in the Boston area, and then my wife eventually moved back. So I'm down here during the week, and if I have an opportunity to get back on the weekends, I do. There's a couple of times where my wife will come down and stay with me a little bit, but getting back is difficult.
these jobs are vocations and avocations. I mean, clearly you have to completely devote yourself to it. A couple of quick things. You went to the Impact Leadership Experience. It's a remote experience where we take people from all over North America. We take them to Colorado, remote location, and it's Ironworker contractor and Ironworker together. Tell us the benefits of that.
At first, I didn't know what I was getting into because you had to take a test before you went to take the class. And I didn't understand what the test was for. It was listening skills, but I didn't know it at the time. Verbal communication skills. And then when I got there, I seen how it all came together. And it shows the strengths and weaknesses of a person too. So it's how your peers look at you. Because when you're in this classroom setting, you're surrounded by friends, and they're telling you the positives and the negatives of you, which is tough to swallow sometimes. But it's coming from friends, so you take it to heart, and it really changed my life. The people I took it with, they said I was taking on too much responsibility. I wasn't dishing out as much work as I should to others.
Right.
And so when I got back, I started looking at the things I was doing and shifting some of the workload onto people that worked with me. And that actually worked out well because now it brought them into knowing the position that I was in. Plus, it started to bring other people up, where before they were just doing as they were being told, and they really weren't having the initiative to take the lead. So after the leadership conference, I started giving people the opportunity to take the lead.
Excellent, excellent. It's a little known fact that Bernie actually wanted to go to the University of Michigan, but circumstances being what they are and where he grew up, he went to Harvard. Tell us about your experience at Harvard.
The Harvard Trade Union program is a phenomenal program. It's unionists throughout the world coming together and talking about the working conditions in each country and what is being done to labor laws in those countries. And you can actually first build camaraderie amongst the trade unionists there, and then not start to understand their problems. But then when you start to relate to the problems that we have back at this country and in Canada, some places we're better off and some places we're a lot worse off. And it gives you an idea of what's going on throughout the world.
Just imagine what you could have learned if you'd gone to Michigan. Couple last questions for you, Bernie. When you throw the keys to the next guy in the general treasurer's slot, if you will, what will you have wanted to accomplish?
I think every step taken has to be an advancement. And so the next guy behind me hopefully is going to be better, and behind him is going to be better. It has to always revolve about being better. And so what I want to do is take it to the next level. We have union pension monies that are being used to fund non-union projects, where working conditions on those projects are very abusive to workers. There's wage theft on those projects, safety concerns on those projects, workers being denied the use of restrooms during working hours. The abuses just continue to surprise me. And I think we should look closely at where union monies are being spent and start calling the people who are investing these money to the table and saying, this can't happen.
Sure. Yeah, understood. So, final question from me. Got 120,000 iron workers out there. If you could sit down, chat with them, have a cup of coffee with them, what would you want to tell each and every one of them?
We touched a little bit in the beginning on this, but safety. Safety has to be everybody's concern. We have to watch everybody's back. And if a member is in a situation where they're keying on the task at hand and they don't see something going on around them, just put your hand on the back and say, you might have a problem here, and let them know about the environment. And I'm sure more often than not, someone's going to thank that person for watching their back, because I always did.
Amen. Amen. So this has been a brief chat with the new General Treasurer, Bernie Evers. Congratulations on your new role, Bernie. He's available 24/7. He always has been. A very dedicated worker, and we're very pleased to have you in that role. There's no doubt about that. This has been another interesting edition of Impact TV. We look forward to seeing you in the very near future.